Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. For those who don't know me, I am Christina Park, the Director of Guidance here. We have been working with your seniors since we entered the building. They have a green folder, so please ask to see it. There's a bunch of resources in there about the college application process. Excuse me. We also have a Canvas page which has a bunch of different resources that we share with our students, and especially we put scholarship information on the Canvas page. So typically our scholarships become available in January and then go out through the spring. So anytime we get a new scholarship, we will be posting it on Canvas. We also have a binder and guidance that students can flip through for hard copies. And then in March is the town-wide scholarship application, which students can fill out once, and they could be eligible for 30 plus scholarships that the town offers. Excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. So we will have no, that's okay. Feel free to pick up the packet. We're gonna have a scholarship assembly for students. Once that scholarship application, the town one, is ready in March. We'll have it during Bridge Block, so we will explain the whole process in terms of how the scholarship application works, okay? In addition to the scholarships that we become aware of, there are a couple of websites out there that we refer students to. One is called FastWeb. It is a free scholarship website. It is international, so people across the world can use it. Students would create somewhat of a profile, and it can generate some scholarships based on the characteristics that they put. So that's just another resource for you to look at. Another resource, which I know Diane will talk about a little bit, is the MIFA website, which has a lot of financial aid and scholarship information for students and families. Other than that, if you know that your student is thinking of applying early action, we've been pushing them to give us their activity sheets, which is what they will be filling out for the teachers to write their letters of recommendation. So just give them a nice gentle nudge that, hey, you have a November 1 deadline, please fill out your activity sheet and give it to your guidance counselor and meet with them. Some students are applying early, some aren't. Everyone's at a different point of this process. So if your student is not applying early, do not panic, that's okay. They don't have to apply early. But just for those that are, the process starts now because deadlines are coming up and we want to make sure that all the materials are in before that deadline. Trying to think of anything else before I hand it over to Diane. I guess the last thing I want to say is this process, your students are feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now. They are definitely anxious. They're comparing themselves to their peers. The application process can be a lot. They have to manage different deadlines, different requirements for each college, on top of their schoolwork and outside life. So if you as parents, guardians can take this financial aid piece off of their shoulders, I would really recommend it because they are definitely feeling the pressure right now. So I always say if the financial aid can be handled by the parent or guardian, that kind of puts the students a little bit more at ease, okay? And with that, I'm gonna introduce Diane Place. She is the Associate Financial Aid Director at Bridgewater State College. She's been doing this for many years, and she is very well versed in the subject. So.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. So this is the how you can connect with MIFA. MIFA is a nonprofit organization. It's the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority, and they are the ones who provide the materials for this presentation. But I just want you to know that I don't work for MIFA. I work for you guys because I work for the state. I don't get paid for being here, so you'll definitely get your money's worth on that account, right? But the reason that I say that is because I volunteer my time because I feel that it's really important for you to get the information from the people who are actually doing the work. So, you know, I'm in the financial aid office. I have been at Bridgewater for 25 years. So yeah, rolled up my sleeves quite a few times with that. So I just think it's really important that you hear the information from the people doing the work, people who are making the decisions, and then it keeps us very much aware too of what kinds of questions that people have. If you would like to get information from MIFA, and I do recommend it, you can scan the QR code. I'll put it back up at the end. I think there's another one at the end anyway. but for the next, this is just a little bit about MIFA. They were created in 1982. I was already working in financial aid at that particular time, not at Bridgewater. And they're a nonprofit, and they were created at the request of colleges and universities in the state, so that there would be one single hub where students and families can go to, and even financial aid professionals, to really get some concrete, really, really good information and some help with the college process. So we are going to be talking tonight about the different types and sources of financial aid. We'll go over the application process. It's not going to be a step-by-step demonstration tonight. That will come later. How the financial aid decisions are made. It's really important stuff going on with that. Paying for college. So at the end, if you really have to kind of come up with some extra money, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'll show you a bunch of free resources that you can get. You'll see some of those throughout the presentation. So the landscape it was a little bit rocky last year, I'm just going to say. So for anyone, did anyone attempt the FAFSA last year? Did you have any other? No, this is going to be first time. Everybody, okay, so we have one. So the FAFSA rollout last year was not smooth. It was kind of rocky road, I would say. The feds have delayed the release of the FAFSA this year for the December 1st. Generally speaking, it's out in October, but they're doing what they're calling a soft rollout to targeted schools and students to kind of work the bugs out before they release it to the general public on December 1st. So that's kind of what was going on. Please know that there is lots of help. Tonight is really just general information to kind of give you an overview of how the process works. But if you need hands-on help in completing the FAFSA, there is help available. It's all free. And we're also just down the road at the university, and we have a FAFSA lab in our office. So if you feel that you want some help, you can come in and use the lab, and someone can help you get through the process.
And about that FAFSA lab, do the students need to be applying to Bridgewater to access it?
No, we don't ask if students are coming to Bridgewater or not. We just don't ask.
We hope, but.
Yes, we're very hopeful, but we don't ask, and it's not a requirement. And on that same note, last year we held two separate nights just open to the general public for FAFSA help. So students definitely did not have to be Bridgewater applicants or even current students. Anyone could come. All the local high schools were invited. So we haven't set our dates yet, but we're probably going to do it again this year. So we're going to talk about the types and sources of financial aid. So what is it? Obviously, it's money that helps students and families pay for college. And there are three main types. There's grant and scholarship aid, which is considered gift aid, the type of aid that everyone wants because it is not required to be repaid ever. And many times there are deadlines associated with gift aid. And you'll hear me say deadline, deadline, deadline throughout this evening, and because that's really an important concept, okay? There's federal work study. That is a federal fund that schools are allocated from the federal government and then given the discretion to award to students as part of their aid package. So when a student is awarded work study, it's a fund that doesn't go directly toward their bill, but the student would engage in a job on campus and then earn a weekly paycheck to kind of give them some spending money. And that's kind of what I meant when I said in 1982 I was in financial aid. I'm pretty sure I was still a student at that time. But I was a student worker in the financial aid office, and that's kind of how I got my start in the business. So you can get some good experience from work study and along with a little bit of spending money too. And the last part are federal student loans, and we know that people don't really like to talk about federal loans, but it is a necessary part many times for students, particularly for students who are either going to school out of state or living on campus. Student loans do play a part in the financial aid offer, and I'm going to talk about that next. So if a student is considering borrowing for any part of their education, we generally recommend that students take the federal loans first. These are loans that are solely in the student's name, so there's no credit checking, there's no co-signing. They can be subsidized or unsubsidized, and I will explain that in a minute. The interest rate is fixed for the life of the loan. So a student may borrow for their freshman, junior, sophomore, junior, senior years And then they will have a 6-month grace period after they graduate, and then they could have up to 10, 15, or even 20 years to repay. So the interest rate is fixed on that loan for the entire time. This year, the interest rate was 6.53, so not the greatest interest rate that the feds have ever come out with, but it's not the worst either. So we'll see what next year brings. Who knows what will happen after the election? I assume there'll be some kind of a shake-up going on. The rates are set, that's okay, the rates are, it says May, but we generally don't find out about it until June. But there'll be a release date for the interest rate. So the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized. The subsidized loan is what we consider need-based aid, so it is based on the student's eligibility, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But the beauty of that is that there is no interest accruing on that loan the whole time the student is in school and for 6 months after they leave school or graduate. As opposed to the unsubsidized loan, which is non-need based, so any student who's eligible can borrow, but the interest does begin accruing on that particular portion of the loan, even while the student is in school. There's no payment required on either one, but the interest would accrue on that. If a student borrows the amounts that are listed here, and the federal government sets these amounts, so they're not really negotiable at all. You can borrow less, but not more. So a student could borrow, if they borrow the max, they end up with about $27,000 worth of debt and then end up paying a little bit more, depending on the repayment plan. And the other reason that we recommend federal student loans first is because they have lots of very flexible repayment plans. So if a student runs into a hardship after they graduate, they're unable to make the loan payments, they could perhaps get a forbearance or deferment while they're in school. If they leave school and then come back, they can go back into deferment. And then there are forgiveness programs as well for teachers and for public servants. So it's a really decent loan program. So your different sources of financial aid, one would be the federal government, and you will hear about the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That is the application for all things federal as far as financial aid goes. You can find out everything you need to know at studentaid.gov. The state of Massachusetts also has a robust financial aid program, and when you complete your FAFSA and indicate that you are a Massachusetts resident, your information will automatically be sent to the state. They have really increased their aid to state schools and universities starting last year and continuing this year. So a really good source of aid there. The college or university to which your students are applying, also a great source of aid. And then there are other agencies, as Parks indicated, all types of scholarships. We also recommend fastweb.com because it is national and international. I would just caution you, look everywhere for scholarship opportunities, but don't pay anyone to do a search for you. Years ago, there were these agencies that would come around and say, oh, we guarantee you the most financial aid, and you don't need anyone to do that for you because there are free resources everywhere for that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about merit-based aid. That is aid that's awarded to students based on something unique or exceptional about the student. It could be in recognition of their academic, artistic, athletic performances, what have you. It might have renewable requirements or not. The thing about merit aid is that students are basically competing against each other when they're applying to different schools. And I just want to say that merit aid is not offered at every school, but the schools that do are generally looking to increase their student population within certain majors, perhaps. Okay, so if your student were awarded a science scholarship, a question that you'd want to ask is it renewable, number one? That would be for any type of merit aid. And that means, can the student continue to receive it once they're a sophomore, junior, and senior? And is there any type of requirement, such as maintaining a certain GPA or staying in the same program for which they were admitted initially? So those are some questions you want to keep in mind. Not every college offers merit aid. The state universities have bumped up their merit aid recently in the past couple of years, but you may not find that same type of aid at, say, at like a community college. You'll want to be checking each college's website often and frequently. You'll want to find out about their merit aid, you want to find out about their deadlines, and if there are any separate applications required to be considered for merit aid. Many times students are being considered when they're admitted, so that process many times will take place through the admissions office as opposed to the financial aid office. So again, just check the deadlines, be on those college websites, and just kind of get familiar with navigating and checking out all of the deadlines. So need-based aid is basically what is awarded through the financial aid office and based on the FAFSA. It is based on a family's financial eligibility, and it is determined using a standardized formula. So that basically means when you're filling out the FAFSA, every student is asked the same questions about family income, family assets, family size, and then they run it through a formula. They assign just went out of my head, sorry, standardized living expenses, and then they come up with eligibility, which is the student aid index. So when you apply for need-based aid, it includes the grants, the loans, the work study that I talked about. Most financial aid is need-based, and students must be making satisfactory academic progress. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So schools that award federal aid are required to have a satisfactory academic progress policy. It can vary between schools, but they're pretty much have two components. So students must be making progress toward graduation by enrolling in enough credits and completing enough credits each semester, and then they must also maintain a certain grade point average to get them to graduation, and that's really what we all want. We know very well that there are lots of different legitimate reasons why students could withdraw or fail or even drop out completely. So there is an appeal process. So if your student should be flagged as not making satisfactory progress, know that they can appeal that decision. And if they have their, oh, I was in a bad car accident and I had to withdraw from school, they can hand in a police report or whatever they have for their situation. And therefore, it allows the student to regain their financial aid eligibility while they work towards getting back in good standing with that policy. I'm also just going to mention one other little thing. When a student withdraws completely from a semester, there is a federal policy called Return to Title IV Funds, and so their financial aid gets recalculated based on the number of days that they actually attended. So I don't want that to be a surprise either, so there's kind of a two-part thing going on here. Okay, so the next one, so we're going to talk about the application process. So the timeline, you really want to check deadlines and required applications, and again, don't be shy about going to the college's websites. You're going to see deadlines all over the place. What you'll want to do, your aim is to meet the earliest deadlines, where the FAFSA is being projected to be released on December 1st, and we wholeheartedly believe the feds are going to come through. You won't find deadlines that are earlier than December, okay? Usually the earliest deadlines that we see are February and March. The Rhode Island schools, a lot of them have February deadlines. A lot of the Massachusetts schools have March deadlines. The state of Massachusetts itself is May 1st. So you're going to see deadlines all over the place. So you really just try to meet the earliest ones so you've got everything covered. Early action decision deadlines are often in October or November, and again, the FAFSA won't even be out at that time. So a student does not have to be admitted to a school or even have applied in order to list that school on their FAFSA when it's time. So you want to, standard deadlines are typically in February or March. You want to make sure that you know what the deadlines are and that you're meeting those deadlines. Again, you're going to hear me say that a lot, but it is important. Okay, you can use the MIFA's College Application Manager to stay organized as part of that QR code, but I think with the green folder,
Yes,
there's probably,
we have an application manager on.
and you know why? Because I was over at Bridgewater Raynham with the former head of guidance here, and she's got the blue
She
folders,
has a
I
blue
think,
folder.
over there. So yeah, there are some tools to really keep you on track and keep you organized. Take advantage of all of them, okay? Because it's a little hard to stay organized, especially when your students are applying to a lot of different colleges.
If I could just add, Diane, I think
Yeah,
what's
please
tricky
do.
for some students is that there's the college application deadline and
Yeah.
the financial aid deadline, and they're
Yep.
different. So managing 8 different colleges' application deadlines and 8 different financial aid deadlines is really confusing for students. So having a way to track those deadlines is really
Yeah.
important.
So one good thing is when the student fills out the FAFSA and they list all of their favorite schools on it, is once the application is submitted, that piece is at least done for that part. So there aren't gonna be those types of multiple applications, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. So we have the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Notice that its first name is free. So if you happen on a fake website and they're trying to get you to pay money to file the FAFSA, you wanna exit immediately. Make sure that the website ends in .gov for government. You can get valid links through any legitimate school has links to the FAFSA. MIFA has links to the FAFSA, and you can plug it in yourself. Just make sure you're doing the .gov extension on that. It is required by all colleges who award federal aid. It must be completed every year. It is going to be available on December 1st. We're hoping maybe in the future they'll bring it back to October. But honestly, it's only been October for a couple of years. Back in the day, it would only come out in January. So we're still kind of early on that scenario. So the 25 high school grads are going to be looking for the 25-26 FAFSA. So when you access the website in December, there will be 2 active FAFSA years, because the students who are currently attending university this year are still able to complete that FAFSA even in December and all throughout next spring. So you'll want to be looking for the 25-26 FAFSA. That's another thing about the deadlines. The FAFSA deadline is for this current year. This current year is not until June of 25. So no one wants to wait until the school year is over to complete the FAFSA, but that's why the deadlines are so confusing, because it really is extended way out. Okay, so don't pay attention to that deadline. So we're going to talk about a contributor. So that is a person who is contributing their consent and their financial data on the FAFSA. So that would basically be the student and their parents. The parents of the household in which they reside, the parents who are supporting them. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So the student should start the application and then invite their parents or their contributors via email. And then once you get the invite, you'll have a link where you can go in and input your own information into your student's FAFSA. So that was brand new last year. It worked pretty well. Emphasis on pretty, not that well. But students did get through it, okay? So that would mean that the student would need an FSA ID, which is the Federal Student Aid ID, that is their electronic signature, and then each of the parents would need their own as well, okay? There is, it must be on the next slide. So each contributor has their own section, which is private, which is one of the reasons why they have done that. The last person, the last contributor to enter their information is the one who can submit the FAFSA. Incomplete FAFSA are deleted after 45 days, so you really don't want to wait. If you get your invitation, you want to get on that, pretty quickly. The FAFSA for the 25-26 academic year will be asking for information about your 2023 tax return. So those are presumably taxes that have already been filed, which makes it a lot easier to get accurate information, and it'll automatically transfer in. So we're going to look at the next one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the FSA ID. This is something that you could actually do right now. So your student would need their own FSA ID, and generally both parents would need one as well in order to get into the FAFSA and complete it. The biggest stumbling block that we had at all of our seminars where we helped families complete the FAFSA was the FSA ID. And it was forgotten passwords, forgotten emails that were used to create the ID. So use the
We have a password
application-
manager
okay.
in our green folder.
In the
that
green
parents should be
folder.
students should be using.
So use that to really keep good track of those FSA ID. You can have your own folder, you know, if you think you need it. But that was the biggest stumbling block that we came across, where it was the trouble with the FSA ID. So if it doesn't work when you're trying to fill out the FAFSA, then there's a delay in submitting. So you kind of want to keep track of that. You can actually apply right now, as long as you keep them safe. You generally have to wait 2 to 4 days to start the FAFSA after you get your FSA ID. So it's kind of a good idea to do it now. So anyone who wants an FSA ID must have an email address, and who needs it would be the student's spouse if they are married, each parent listed on the FAFSA. But then here's that little caveat that I was going to talk about before. It says, right, if parents have filed a joint tax return, then only one needs an FSA ID. I would say do the 2 of them anyway, because it's just safer to have them both. Okay. Anyone without a social security number will answer knowledge-based questions, and they can still sign off electronically. Now, this is a question that I've gotten in a couple of seminars that I've done. If a parent already has an FSA ID because they have another child who's gone to college and they needed it, they can use that same one. If they have one because they themselves were a student, they can use that one as well. It's connected to your name, your date of birth, and your social. It's your electronic signature for all things federal in the financial aid business. So, yes?
If you have an FSA ID already from previously, but then you want to do the joint.
Yes. So the
same ID, or would you just then recommend that your spouse get a separate ID?
So the question, I believe, is if you already have an FSA ID
Correct.
as a parent, you can absolutely use that one to sign your child's FAFSA. But your student will still need their own.
Right, but then your spouse, so when you're saying if you file jointly, the spouse can join. My question is, can that spouse join?
So the question is about this little caveat down here. If the parents filed a joint tax return, then only one parent actually needs the FSA ID because their information will transfer over as one. But it's always a good idea to have both parents have it, just in case. We see a lot of things. Okay. So what is reported on the FAFSA? Of course, your general information, your student's name, date of birth, social, address, all of those things that you would expect. The citizenship status for both. All U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens can fill out the FAFSA and receive financial aid. Undocumented students in Massachusetts only are now eligible for Massachusetts-based aid. That was I saw some eyebrows go up. I'm not going to say anything. That was a incentive that Governor Healy has recently put into play, and I believe last year was the first year that we experienced that, but we're having a lot more students come forward with that now. So it's only in the state of Massachusetts, and they would not be eligible for federal aid. However, they would be eligible for Massachusetts state aid. And students who may be undocumented should contact the financial aid office at the schools that they're going to, or they can contact the Office of Student Financial Assistance in Massachusetts to get the application details on that. The colleges where your student is applying, each one will receive the FAFSA. And then for parents' information, parents who are married, including same gender parents, you include both. All parents who live together, whether they're married or not, if they are the parents of the student. Divorced or separated, it's the parent who provided the most financial support in the last 12 months and their current spouse. That's who's going on the FAFSA. If parents provided equal support, the parent with the greater income and assets is the one that goes on the FAFSA. Legal guardians are not considered parents. So if you are a legal guardian of a student, that student would be considered independent for financial aid purposes, and your information would not be required to be reported at all on the FAFSA form. It's for students who have legal guardians. The number in household is going to pull from your IRS tax return. So if you had a joint return, you and your current spouse, you're still married to that spouse, and you have 2 dependents, so you have a family of 4, that information would automatically transfer to the FAFSA. But there is a separate question asking is this the real household size? Because a lot of times, divorced parents will share the dependents, like opposite years or something of that nature. So there is another question that we'll just ask, is this the correct household size? And if it's not, you can enter the correct household size. They do ask for the number of children that are attending college, but it is not used in the calculation. The feds eliminated that last year. That was a big, big change for us. The other is financial information for both the student and their parents. We pull the information in from the IRS once you give your consent. That's the whole FSA ID, the invitation. Once you get in there, that's your consent. Taxed and untaxed income that appears on the tax return. I'll just caution you about this. So sometimes when you file your taxes, particularly if you have left one job and go to another, and if you roll over your IRA or your retirement account, it'll show up as a rollover on your tax return. Anyone familiar with that term? The rollover? Yeah, okay, a couple of people. So even if it says rollover on your tax return, it will show up as untaxed income. So it will look like you've actually received that income as opposed to rolling it into another retirement account. So if that has happened to you, you want to notify the financial aid office that is at the school, not FAFSA, because they don't make any changes to it. But notify the school, they'll help you get through that. We can take that out of there to get a more accurate picture of your real income, okay? And it's really important, particularly if you're rolling over, you know, a retirement account that's worth over $500,000. That's gonna show up as a large amount of untaxed income. So just a cautionary, if you happen to see rollover on your tax return, you want to notify the offices so that they can help you with that. On that same venue, if you have had a change in income or change in family circumstances from 2023 to the current year, you'll also want to notify the financial aid offices of that. And they can help you. They'll request other documents from you, but many times, for instance, if there was a loss of job from 23 to 24, we can go in and use your 24 taxes to recalculate the student's eligibility. But we don't know unless you tell us, okay? And there really is not any place on the FAFSA to report that, so you would have to notify the offices. Just send a quick email and let them take it from there. So as far as assets, you're going to include the value of savings, checking accounts, investments, all types of business, small businesses, farm, and other property. You would include an education savings plan, like a 529 or one of the MIFA, the U Fund or something, only for the student who is on the FAFSA. So if you have multiple children and they all have an education savings account, you only need to report the one that's associated with the student on the FAFSA. And you would report that under the parent's income as opposed to the student. It's much more favorable when it's reported as a parent asset as opposed to the student. Don't include your primary home. So you have one home, you live in it, you do not need to report the value of that home, nor do you report the value of your retirement accounts, your entire, like 401k or 403b, whatever you have. You don't need to report the value of that. Child support received is reported as an asset on the FAFSA, which is kind of a favorable change that the feds made 2 years ago because the assets don't count as heavily as income. So that was a good change that they made. Debt is not reported on the FAFSA anywhere except as it's related to an asset. And what that means is, so let's say you have a second home that you rent out, and we'll keep the math simple. So let's say the value of that home is $500,000 and you owe $250 on it, so the net value is another $250. So that's the only place where debt is taken into account, is when it's related to an asset that you are reporting. Okay, other applications would be the CSS profile. There is a cost associated with the profile, so it's $25 for the first school and $16 for each additional school, but there is assistance and waivers available for parent income under $100,000, or if the family meets other certain criteria. The profile is already out, so there was no delay on the profile. It came out on October 1st. You don't have to worry about trying to report a school that doesn't require the profile, because there's a drop-down menu. So for instance, if you're on the profile and you say, oh, I'm going to send my information to Bridgewater State University, you will not find the university in the drop-down because we don't require the profile. It's only the schools that require it that will be in that drop-down box, okay? For this, they do ask for slightly different information than what's on the FAFSA. They can ask for a lot more. They can ask about non-custodial parents when they would submit their own profile. They can sometimes ask about the value of your primary home and your retirement account. So very different information. The reason for that is because the schools that are requiring the profile, generally speaking, have a lot more money to award to students. So they want to really look at an overall health of the family as opposed to just using the FAFSA data, which is, has been really cut back in the past few years. So you can also look at some of the webinars that are available just to kind of get some help, and it's required by some colleges and universities, but not all.
I'd say a lot of the private schools
Yes, the privates.
that we've been working with are requiring it now, especially because of delay in FAFSA. I feel like more schools are requiring the CSS profile, so you can find out if a school by going on either the CSS profile website, or if you can look at your son or daughter's list of schools, you can go on their website, and on their financial aid page it would say they require FAFSA and CSS profile.
Yep.
None of the state schools in Massachusetts require a CSS profile, but some of the private schools do.
Yeah. And you're right, they did institute because the CSS profile was available and there wasn't a big delay last year, it enabled the schools to make a more of an equitable assessment while they were still waiting for the FAFSA. So after you apply, the colleges and the state in which you reside will receive your information electronically. The student will receive an output document now it's called the FSS. I still haven't gotten used to that. Colleges may request additional documentation due to mandatory verification. So verification is not a scary thing. It's not an audit, and your application does not get selected because you did anything wrong. It's a random selection, and the feds have cut way back on the verification this year. We noticed a real decline in the amount of students' applications that were selected for verification, and that's because of the consent and the information transferring directly from the IRS. So there's a lot less to verify. If your application should be selected, don't worry about it, just contact the school. They'll provide you with the documentation that's needed. You may have to submit a copy of your tax return even if you've done the transfer, but the school will let you know exactly what is needed. Colleges will review your applications and determine a financial aid offer. Many times a school will go out with estimates for applications that are selected for verification. So the estimate is only as good as the information that's actually on the FAFSA. So just keep that in mind if you get an estimated award. Financial aid may be sent with the admissions decision or later. So a lot of times students will get their merit offer from the admissions office, and then the financial aid offer, the need-based aid, will come in a separate mailing or sometime later. You just want to look at the website to see what the timing is. So we know that we're probably not going to go out with any financial aid offers before December 1st because we're waiting on the FAFSA, most of us. But it should be usually within a month or so after that. Could be February once schools. It depends on when the feds release the FAFSA. So one of the debacles that happened last year was even though students and families were able to submit their FAFSA, the feds held on to them and did not process them immediately. So it was at least a month or so delay before they released them to schools. We're hoping that's not going to happen. They have said that that is not going to happen this year, and it's the feds, so I believe it. I have full faith that we're going to get those FAFSAs right away.
But a lot of families in a pinch though, because some schools still had the decision day of May 1st, and they didn't give a lot of time to review their financial aid package and make that decision. So I'm hoping.
We're hoping for a much smoother rollout this year. Yep. So verification, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because again, it's they've cut way back on the amount of verification that they're doing. But if your application is selected by the feds, each school is responsible to perform verification on your application, okay? And so you'll be wanting to send the verification information to each of the schools that you're serious about attending. Must comply with all financial aid. So generally speaking, it's a tax return, verification worksheet, which is supplied by the school, and income asset account statements. Not always required by every school, but be prepared in case you're asked for those things. You'll want to be sure that you're reviewing everything that comes from the colleges. If it seems like, oh, why are they asking for this? I sent this last week. Just do a little follow-up. Sometimes things get lost, or a student's ID will get transposed, and sometimes we have trouble finding matching up the student and the parent to see whose verification documents we're dealing with. So just do a follow-up. Just don't let it sit there. And you can also log into the college's the web portals. We at Bridgewater are still using paper information and requests just to our brand new students. That way we can send them the verification worksheets. But not all colleges are doing that. So you'll want to log into the portal to be sure that you know what's being requested by each school. Okay. So learn about your financial aid office. We're not scary people. We are professionals. We're in the business. However, most of us are parents too. Some of us have already put their students through school. Some of them are very young professionals and just kind of up and coming, but have just recently graduated from college also. So get to know who they are, how they operate. And there are many different ways that you can contact. You can do a phone call, you can do an email, you can do the chat if it's available. Email is kind of a nice way to explain your situation, and particularly if you have things that have changed, okay? I briefly touched on that, but if there was a change in income from the FAFSA year to 24 or even into 25, you want to let the financial aid office know and let them handle it on a case-by-case basis. Okay? So how the decisions are made. So this is the important stuff. So the first thing that we do is we look at the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance includes things that you would expect: tuition and fees, food and housing if your student is going to be residing on campus, books and supplies, which are purchased on their own, but they're also, they're going to have those costs, transportation, and personal expenses. So we always get questions from students, particularly students who are commuting, and they're looking at their cost of attendance, and they're saying, why are you charging me for transportation? So those are not charges that will appear on a student's bill, but those are things that you're already paying for. Someone is paying to get the student back and forth to school, for their books, for personal expenses. So we include it as part of the cost of attending school, although you're not necessarily billed for all of those things. Even a student who's not residing on campus, they have to live somewhere, and they're eating somewhere too. We all know that when we have those young ones, right, living in our household. So, so when you see the cost of attendance, it's not necessarily going to be the same as the bill. Okay, it's generally larger than that because it includes these indirect expenses. The student aid index is the number that represents a family's financial strength. So that's that standardized formula that comes from filing with FAFSA. CSS profile could have a different one, but again, it's still a standardized formula. So the same formula for every family. Income weighs more heavily than assets. I did briefly touch on that. Some colleges use the institutional formula. That's the CSS profile. You can tell I've done the thing quite a few times, right? The family does have the primary responsibility for paying. With that said, there are families who their student aid index is a 0 because their income is low or their family is very large compared to the income, and so there is not an expectation of a contribution from a family with a 0 SAI, and that is very possible. The family has the primary responsibility, but it's not necessarily what the family will pay, as I stated with that cost of attendance. There is an SAI calculator on MIFA.org. If you're dying to find out what it's going to be, you can use that. Get a little sneak peek on that. And so here's the formula. We start with the cost of attendance with all those components that I talked about. We subtract the student aid index, And the result is the financial aid eligibility, and we use that number to build a financial aid package or make an offer, which can be comprised of different types of financial aid. So, yeah, this one is kind of a little big. Yeah, you could just fill them all in. So in this financial aid awarding scenario, we're going to start with a college that has a cost of attendance of $45,000, and the SAI is came out as $5,000. Okay, so depending on your point of view, $5,000 could seem like a large contribution. However, for this year, that student would still be eligible for a federal Pell Grant and grants from the state of Massachusetts, because it's really not that high of a student aid index, speaking in the financial aid world. So in this particular scenario, we've got some scholarship and grant money that have been plugged in. So this could be a combination of the federal grants, state grants, and maybe perhaps some merit aid as well. We've got that student loan, $5,500 is the maximum amount that a freshman can borrow. There's an offer of work study for $2,000. That will be money that the student could earn in a job. And then there's still $5,000 worth of unmet needs. So it's kind of like what happens when we're building an award package. And we're going to we're going to talk a little bit about net price calculators. So this is a tool that you can find on the college's websites that will help you determine what's going to be your net price. So not necessarily the gross price, the big cost of attendance, but what happens after the aid has been plugged in, perhaps some merit aid, different types of things like that, and then it'll kind of give you an idea of what it could cost. It's very personalized because you're plugging in the numbers, so the information that comes out is only as good as what goes in. It will display federal and institutional aid, and there are also maybe some merit aid in there when they ask the student about their GPA. I'm not a huge fan of the net price calculator, but it is a helpful tool. So this is one of my favorite slides, so I'm going to this one and the next one. So we're going to talk about what happens when you start to get those offer letters in the mail and some of the things that you really want to hone in on. So we're still using the cost of attendance at $45,000, student aid index at the 5, and so your total eligibility for the student is $40,000. That's what the financial aid office is going to build in and trying to meet here. So College A is giving a really great offer of the $32,500 and a scholarship and grants. So we know it could be a combination of the federal aid, the merit aid, institutional monies as well. You've got your student loan plugged in there. You've got your work study for a total of the full unmet need of $40,000. So great offer. College B, also another great offer, although they are leaving a little bit more of unmet need here. And then the same with College C. So this is just to kind of give you an example that even though the college costs the same, 3 colleges all costing the same, the eligibility of the student is all the same, right? They have their SAI, they carry it with them, it's the same in each scenario. Yeah, the 5,000. But the offers can be very, very different. So it really, what we're talking about is the availability of funds at each of the different institutions. Some have robust scholarship drives, others have a little bit less money to award to students. It could be that some of the merit aid that was awarded here maybe wasn't awarded here because that particular school is trying to build up the program that your student has applied for. So there are lots of different things that can happen. So you really just want to be on the lookout for that. And this next one is a little bit of a different scenario. So again, cost is the same, SAI is the same, and over here the bottom line is all the same. So everyone is making the same offer of $35,000 total. But the thing that I really want to point out is the sources of aid. So you've got your colleges that are giving some grant and scholarship. In College C, I'm sorry, I can't reach up there, so I'm just going to use this little one down here. College C is not offering any grant or scholarship money, so you think like, oh, well, why is that happening? Perhaps it's a missed deadline. We really don't know. You've got your student loan, but then in these two, we're looking at this parent loan here. See that? Like, that's kind of a big surprise, isn't it? So some schools will automatically package up either a parent loan or some type of alternative loan to show you how you can afford the bill. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you've applied for the loans, that you want to apply for the loans, or that you'd be approved for those particular loans. Those are credit-based loans, not necessarily in the student's name. But I just want to point that out, that is, you really want to look at the sources of aid that are being offered, because, again, some schools will plug that in there just to show you, like, okay, here's the bottom line, and here's your aid package. So if you're not prepared to borrow funds, of that nature on their students' behalf, then you really want to be very much aware of where the funds are coming from, okay? So anything that says loan, pay strict attention to, and then try to figure out who's the borrower here. So if it's a parent loan, we know that the student is not the borrower, okay? And that is what I like to point out about that. And so now we're going to talk about paying for college. So some of the things that you'll want to be aware of and talking to your students about is, number one, we don't want to discount a school solely based on the cost. Some of the schools have some high price tags out there, but the higher the cost of the school, the more eligible the student is. You take your student aid index, so they would demonstrate higher eligibility at a higher price school. And that school may have enough grant funding to fill in that gap. So you don't want to discount a school solely based on the price tag. The other part of it is you really want to pay attention to the type of aid that's being offered and what makes one school a favorite over another. So myself as a parent, I love the school that left me with no unmet need. There was a great scholarship offer in there, and it looked like it was pretty affordable. But if that's not your student's favorite school, you're going to want to be prepared to have those difficult conversations. Like, is there a compromise that could be made? Or, what are we going to do to get you to that front door, or to get you to that dorm room on move-in day? So those are some conversations that you want to have. So in this particular scenario, we're looking at $20,000 that the family needs to come up with. And these are the different ways that you can deal with that. So paying from past income is saving. And I always like to say it's never too early or too late to begin saving. We literally have about a year before next fall. So there's a year that could be, some aggressive saving going on in the family. So perhaps student and parent can each contribute with savings. Praying with present income is usually referring to a payment plan. Most colleges do have some type of payment plan. So they will take your semester bill minus any financial aid that's been accepted, and the balance of that, if it's manageable enough, can be spread out into a 4-month or 5-month payment plan. So you can kind of pay as you go. And then an education loan. So here's the thing, if the balance after the financial aid is too large of a payment to fit into your monthly budget, you could choose a payment that you're comfortable with. Like you say, okay, we can't do $2,000 a month, but I think we can do X, whatever the number is. You could set up a payment plan based on the amount that you choose, and then you could borrow the rest. So any amount that you're either paying from savings or paying as you go with a payment plan is less money that you'll have built up in debt. And I'm not opposed to any type of student borrowing. I know that it's a necessary thing in a lot of cases. And I also, I don't want to disparage the PLUS loan, the parent loan that we saw on the previous slide. The PLUS loan is a very good loan. It's a federal loan for parents. It has favorable terms. The interest rates are usually pretty reasonable. Parents have the option to either defer payment while the student is in school or even begin payment while the student is still in school. So I'm not saying that it's a bad loan. But if it's not a loan that you're willing to borrow, then you want to be sure that it's not part of the offer. And that's kind of why I sort of attacked it a little bit in that way. And so we're wrapping it up pretty soon here. So here are some other important, the kitchen table conversations, as we like to call them. So what's each school's net price? So you kind of want to be familiar and try to figure that all out. What is the right step for the student? Because there are really so many options. So you really want to have a balanced college list, okay? So, everybody knows about their safety schools, maybe the affordable schools, maybe some reach schools, some kind of in between. So you really want to have a list that's going to provide some options for students. Consider starting at a community college since it's free in Massachusetts. The old, if it's free, it's for me. We know that community college is not for every student, but it really is a valuable tool and an important way to save money for a lot of students. Okay, so that is an option as well. Particularly students who maybe you're not too sure what their future goals are. The community college is a really affordable way to get your feet wet. So starting there can obviously save a significant amount of money. Consider the number of students in your family that will be going to college perhaps after this first one. And think in terms of total debt. So at least 4 years, sometimes more. So if you're borrowing for the first year, are you going to have to borrow for the second, third, and fourth years as well? And does the college provide services that your student needs? Okay, if your student has some type of a learning disability and they have an IEP or some of the other 504, I was going to say 403 because that's the savings plan, 504, those can be taken with them to the college. Most colleges have services for students who are in need of that and should receive accommodations as well. So you kind of want to look into some of that stuff to be sure that your student is going to be receiving the services that they really need. And then again, would taking a gap year benefit the student? Those are just some questions to consider. So paying for college in Mass, again, so they're saying that the state deadline is May 1st, and that is true, but your school's deadlines, which are very important, could be earlier than that. So you don't want to just take that to the bank and go with that. You really want to investigate to find out those early deadlines and meet those. So there's free community college, and Mass Reconnect is kind of the same thing. Free community college for adults over 25. So I guess it doesn't matter how old you are, it's still free. The Mass Grant Plus expansion, that is one of the robust funds that I talked about earlier. So the state of Massachusetts received a large amount of funding for the past couple of years, and we are able to then turn around and really help out that middle income group of families. So we know that we fully support lower income and high need families, but this year the state has really ramped up their support for that middle income group, and it's a really good feeling to be able to help out that group of hardworking people. So the tuition equity law is some undocumented students in Mass can receive in-state tuition and state aid. They need to contact their schools about that. We have the Mass Transfer program that makes transferring from that community college into the state universities very smooth. And there's tuition breaks for students who reside out of the state coming in and vice versa. And then the Mass portal will show all of the different types of financial aid that the state offers, and the student can actually create an account there. And I think, so we're just going to look at some free resources. So FAFSA Day, they have not published all the dates yet, but those are different locations where you can attend virtually, go into a room with a person and do one-on-one and help you fill out the FAFSA. The events will be held October through February. I don't think they're starting in October because the FAFSA's not out yet. They're offered in both English and Spanish. You can register and find out the dates at fafsaday.org. Mass Educational Opportunity Centers are nonprofits that provide free services for families in help in filling out the FAFSA. And then the MIFA pathway also has lots and lots of different resources to help you get through the process. And so this is staying on track through the senior year, which is really kind of your thing. But these are just some tips, just to kind of what's going to be coming up. So you definitely want to get your FAFSA done early. So what are you going to do now? You're going to do the FSA ID, keep the passwords and the email addresses that you used in a safe place. Bring them with you when you fill out your FAFSA, because you're going to need that. During the winter, you can submit admission applications. What about college tours? You guys are doing college tours? We've seen a lot of parents on the campus. Have you guys visited Bridgewater? Anybody? Have you been there? Somebody? Oh yeah, we have some hands. So I'm going to give a plug for my own school. Okay, no guilt involved. It's a beautiful campus. And we have a really robust education program, along with a lot of other really high need. We have that cybersecurity, which is a brand new program this year. So we have a lot going on, and it's a place to check out. I know it's just around the corner, but it really is. It's just like it's such a nice little gem. And then sort of senior year in the springtime, you're going to be receiving the offers. You could attend any of the MIFA. You can do them all virtually, comparing the 8 offers. So if you want to have a non-biased opinion and say, hey, what does this look like? Am I really seeing this? You can attend one of those virtual webinars, and a MIFA representative will help you through that. So they don't work for any schools. They're not associated with any particular schools. So they're very, very non-biased and will give you some really good advice if you want to check that out. And I think these are just the rest of the QR codes. And while you're looking at that, I will open it up to questions if anybody has anything they would like to ask. If no one is brave enough to ask it in front of the group, I will stay behind, and if you have something personal that you want to ask, but if there's anything that you feel needs clarification that the group would benefit from, you can ask that. No? Everything was crystal clear. Okay, good, we have questions.
So I'm a little confused on, there's the early action, early decision that's due October, November.
I can help you with that.
Yes, I was just going to turn that over.
FAFSA is not until December?
Yes, so the college application deadline, so some of them are in October, there's some October 15th ones, which is primarily a lot of the southern schools do early action. Students necessarily don't have to apply early action if they're not ready or want to. We usually recommend early action if the student is at or above that school's average GPA, SAT, whatever. November 1st is another big early action deadline. But the student would apply to college first and then fill out the financial aid application. And then they would get their decision probably, their college acceptance decision would be probably like December, January, but their financial aid decision may be coming after. So the college may say, this is what we would give for maybe merit scholarship awards with their college acceptance letter, but then the financial aid package may be coming a little bit later. So you would still fill out the college application. The students can submit that by their early action deadline if they choose to do early action. And then you would be submitting the financial aid application through either FAFSA or that CSS profile or both to some schools. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that it was useful information for you. Don't be shy about asking questions. If you don't want to ask them to me, contact the schools that your students are applying to and just ask away. We do not mind. That is what we're there for.
Thank you.